Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the E3 podcast. I'm Melissa Johnson. Today, I have Mandy McAllister, a very good friend of mine. Awesome, cool lady. Mandy is a multifamily real estate investor, a mindset ninja, an eternal learner, coach, and dot connector. Her passion is to help others define their path to financial freedom through syndications, coaching, and her platform, Aspiring Women Achieving More, which I'm a part of. So thank you, Mandy, for coming on today and talking with us.
So pumped for so many reasons, not the least of which is to catch up with you. So thanks for the invitation.
Yes, we had a good little catch-up session before this. This will be good. So let's first talk about just how you got into real estate and kind of talk about that journey of how you got started and sort of where you're at today.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of initially got interested in real estate investing when I was at a party in college. I was 19 years old, standing on like the patio of this house, and my friend was explaining that her dad bought the house and she rented out the rooms to our like fellow sorority sisters. And I'm like, and you get to keep that money? That is the best idea I've ever heard in my whole life. So, from that started, reading all the books that everybody reads, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Richest Man in Babylon, all of that stuff. And, I was on the path of do the right thing. Little girl gets straight A's, does the stuff that's meant, you're supposed to do, right? And it took me like from interest in 1999 to 2016 to actually go buy something for express purpose of investment. So, I'm here to tell you that until you can do all the learning in the world and know all of the things that you could possibly know, but until you start like actually doing, taking action and figuring out what you're scared of to go, make it happen, that's when real growth happens. That's when your life can really change.
I agree. And not just what you're scared of too, but trying all these different things to figure out what you enjoy, right? Because you could do like, maybe you flip a couple and you're like, I really hate flipping. Maybe I want to wholesale, or maybe I want to get into multifamily. So it really gives you a chance to explore all these different exit strategies.
Absolutely. And not being married to just one. I think there was probably 6 years in there or so that I had this BRRRR idea, must do this, buy, live in it for a while, refinance, move out thing. Like I had to do that. That's the only way to do it. And I was so married to that idea that in the city of Chicago, this all happened in like 2008 when the market wasn't going in our favor, So I lost a number of years of forward movement because I had to do it one specific way.
Are you still using that method right now, or where are you at in your investing stage?
Yeah. Well, so the market is what the market is. Like it's giving us what it's giving it. And I'm working to be nimble, like, focused, but nimble. So, my wheelhouse and the thing that I get asked to give presentations and coach on a lot are small multis. So call it 4 units to about 50 is my wheelhouse. I love that space. I think that there's, a lot of room for growth in terms of meat on the bone. The big guys are looking at 100 units plus. And the easy entry point sometimes is the single family home or duplex type area. I think that, a lot of mom and pops are going to be selling that I've got my eyes wide open for doing new deals, usually either for my own portfolio or for joint ventures in that small multi-space. That's kind of what's happening a lot now rather than syndications. That joint venture structure ends up working better with what we've got. And, I'm doing some repositions of single family rentals. I'm single family houses into rentals and then selling them off as turnkey rentals. So the way I kind of look at it is, the stuff that I own with a rental income coming in every single month, that pays me forever. That's kind of like a forever money. But in order to get into those deals where I have forever money, you need some capital. And what funds those are these one-time money things, like the repositions of the turnkey rentals. So I'm doing kind of an equal number of both of those right now.
Yeah. And that's smart. And that's what I coach a lot of my clients on too. We talk about, of course, everyone wants financial freedom. And one of the best ways to get there is through passive income like that. But you do have to have cash coming in too. And you do have to have reserves built up when you've got a lot of rentals and stuff like that too. So, like for me, I do the same thing too, just not with multifamilies, but, I buy rentals and hold them, but I also know that I need to keep flipping just to keep those infusions of cash coming in so that I can maintain the rentals that I have and build up reserves and things like that. So that's
well, and likely you get to cherry pick the ones when you finished flipping something. Oh, wow, this would make an incredible rental. Rather than sell it off, you might choose to keep it.
exactly.
But I don't think we've ever talked about this, but one thing, financial freedom means a bazillion things, right? And everybody looks for it. And, but what exactly does that mean? And I firmly believe that you can't get anywhere that you're not looking directly at. So one thing we talk about a lot in Aspiring Women and through, the folks that I coach is you've got to know what that North Star is. Where are you running to? And then you just figure out that next right step. And that's the only thing you got to pay attention to. So to figure out that North Star, and what I can say personally, I wanted financial freedom. I knew I was doing well going in that direction, but I didn't ever define it. What do I need to be able to quit my job? And I talked to some of my multifamily cohorts, usually guys, because that's really who represents in multifamily. And, they would say, well, I'm just going to get that acquisition fee and then this disposition fee. And then all I need to do are 3 deals a year and I can quit my job. And I'm like, but you've got to do 3 deals a year. What happens if there's not 3 really good deals worth doing? Then you're doing a deal that you shouldn't be doing just because you need to feed your family. So I made this little calculator that basically helps you estimate what you need and helps you kind of back into the passive income that you need the levels you need to see to feel good about leaving your job or whatever different levels of financial freedom. So I'll make sure I get you that link and we can add it here, because personally for me, from the moment of figuring this number out to being able to leave my day job, it was 12 months when I knew where I was aiming.
Yeah. And that's important. That is important to chart that, that's what we're talking about a lot too, is just knowing why you want to do something, what are the reasons behind it, and defining what financial freedom means for you, because it's not always, it means something different to everybody. And so when people say, well, one of my first questions coaching is, why do you want to do this? And it's always for financial freedom. I'm like, yeah, I get, dig deeper though. There's something else behind that. Do you want to start a nonprofit? Do you want to, retire your mom? Just people have different goals. And so there's different paths of how to get there. But having a calculator like that would be really valuable for people, I think, because you got to reverse engineer too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's the analogy that I use a lot is if I want to drive from Chicago to San Antonio, I go to Google Maps and I put that in as my North Star. And then it will tell me, go 500 feet, turn left. All I need to think about is that 500 feet and turn left. And then the next right step will basically appear. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it made so much sense in how I approached financial freedom, and to really kind of reward yourself. Because, if I had my mortgage covered and I could feed my kid, that's one level of financial freedom, right? Mm-hmm. Then there's, I have a private jet membership, which is another level of financial freedom, which I'm aspiring to right now. So.
Yeah. I never thought about it that way, but that's a good way of explaining it. Cause it is a gradual, I hit that milestone. Now I hit this milestone and hit this mm-hmm. milestone, and it grows and changes as you reach one milestone, you replace it with something else. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? So that there's always growth happening there.
And if you're at this point that you're, like me in 1999, that this is an exciting idea and I believe in it and I'm learning, if the only goal that you've got in your mind is that private jet situation, it seems so far away. It seems unattainable that you might, not be totally motivated because it doesn't seem attainable. So if you just think about that next goal, that encourages growth in a bigger way.
Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit about that gap between, the education, the finding out about this, and then the taking of action. What clicked for you to finally decide okay, I'm ready to pull the trigger on this now?
So there were a couple of things, and each kind of new level of thing I was doing required its own new set of work. So just, I feel like if you're doing single family and you look at multifamily, that might feel like a lot. You might have a new set of work to do. So understand that that's completely normal. So in 2016, my son was born. So, you know, it's this click of, oh, this is not like a dress rehearsal. Like we only get to do this once. And my idea was that this is his college fund. So I bought a fourplex next to a college. I knew that I'd have it paid off within 18 years by the time he'd go to college. I would pull out money and that would, oh gosh, this, you know, $300,000 or whatever it is that we could pull out. That's, you know, your tax-free college fund that, you know, if he chooses to be a welder, then he could do something else with it, you know. So that was the must take action thing there. But, you know, I had a whole new set when I got into the bigger deals.
What's the biggest deal you've done so far?
When I've been at the helm, 53. I've been part of syndications where I wasn't the lead decision maker up to 130 units, but 53 is the big guy. We're about to do another 47. We're under contract for that. So
Nice.
I like that. The thing is, I find with myself, I get real comfortable in a little wheelhouse, you know, and then anything that's like, you know, bigger or it's this whole new set of work. But right now, I really do think that there's a legit economic story for focusing on these smaller multis. So that's where I'm giving my attention here.
Yeah, there is such a need too. We were talking about this the other day. I was talking about with another person I was interviewing, just the need for more affordable housing right now too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think being able to
Absolutely.
provide that, you know, in the small multifamily space is probably really valuable, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, if you're a developer, you're not likely building B-class stuff, you know, you're with the workforce housing stuff. You're likely, if you're going to be, especially lumber and inputs right now, like you're
Yeah,
probably buying like, or you're probably building new A-class, super high-end stuff to make it make sense in terms of your return. So um, there is a gap there.
for sure. So you mentioned that that you were doing more like JV type deals, right? As opposed to syndication. Can you kind of
Mm-hmm.
break that down, like how you find the partners and how that's
Mm-hmm.
structured and
So, by definition from the SEC, in order for something to be a joint venture rather than a syndication, everyone involved has to be active, right? So if you want to do a JV rather than a syndication, if you're going to take somebody's money and, you know, promise a return or have a projection of a return or pay them some money back, you've sold a security, right? So you have to go through all of the, you know, exemption stuff for syndication. But for a joint venture, you know, I run a multifamily related meetup in Chicago, and an attendee, you know, had a relationship with my business partner, my co-host of that meetup. And, you know, he wanted to get into multifamily. He had hotels that were during COVID not doing great. So he wanted investment and needed to place some capital. So we knew that we had kind of this bigger, he wanted to place a good bit of capital. So we looked for appropriately sized deals that would help him deploy that amount. So because this is my wheelhouse now, like I get to have these types of conversations, and like some old friends, some old mentors, some women in a mastermind that I'm a part of have, you know, called me asking for the opportunity to do a kind of a smaller joint venture type thing. So that's kind of how we find the partners. And then we figure out the size that makes sense for each individual group. What I will say though, I think a perfect little sweet spot is, you know, one of the reasons to do multifamily rather than single family is the type of debt instruments you can get. So if you're willing to borrow $1 million or more, which is I mean, my eyes were spinning the first time I learned about this stuff. But if you are doing single family and you add up like 5 or 6 houses worth of mortgage, I bet you're right at that $1 million mark. So it's not really as scary as you think. You can get Fannie or Freddie, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, their investment grade vehicles. So Google agency debt, Google Freddie Mac small balance loan program. That's the easier one to qualify for. And that debt is non-recourse. So what that means is if it all goes south, if everything goes wrong, then you're not personally liable for however much got messed up. If you have, let's say, for example, you have $1 million loan on property that's worth $1.5 million, in single family, and then you have this non-recourse stuff that is the exact same situation. Let's say the bottom falls out like it did in 2008, and now that portfolio is worth 700,000. Well, you owe $1 million on both of those, right? Well, if you have the non-recourse debt, you're not responsible for that extra 300,000. You do have to give back the property, right? But you're not personally responsible. So if you can get this non-recourse, long-term, incredible rate debt from Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae, if you're buying at 75,000 a door, which is really what we just, bought that 53 unit for, that's like, we're talking an 18 or a 19 unit. It's not so far outside the realm of possibility to be able to get that type of debt on a small multi.
That's really smart when you think about how many deals you have to do in just like straight residential, like single family homes versus it. So looking at it that way, that's a good mindset shift, for people that are scared like myself, not scared, but I've never touched multifamily, but it's unfamiliar but shifting that mindset to understand that it's the same thing as doing several flips basically at a time, when you're talking about dollars. And probably even time too, because if you're having to do renovations and stuff like that on these multifamily buildings.
And lots of times, you have a property manager, like you can get a more business savvy property manager with the larger complexes who will likely help you run these rehabs too. So, I wouldn't call myself a flipper. I've not really done that. I've relied very heavily on my teams in property management to help me achieve this stuff. You're the go-to flipper. You're doing stuff that kind of makes me nervous. Do you know what I mean? It's because like you're playing, it's whatever sandbox you get comfortable in, And I would say too, another thing about this debt, we got 3.68% for a 15-year term. 8 years of it was interest only. So think about like the room you've got in terms of cash flow for this bet, just because like my background's in economics, like that is an asset unto itself in as much as the cash flowing apartment complexes. So, gosh, what type of debt are you getting on your single family stuff? Maybe it does make sense. Maybe we need to talk JV after this call.
I know, maybe we should, because I'm paying 10% interest on these rehabs that I'm doing, but shoot, if I could do more deals and have that low interest and interest
Throw
only.
it in for, legacy. What you've got the engine. The way that I think about it in my head is that you've got the engine that's making this one-time money, and then you've got this legacy vehicle that's going to be spinning off this forever money for you. You kind of need both to be in growth mode. If what you're just in is like kind of sustain mode, that kind of becomes your floor of earnings. So that little calculator that I made, it's really just helping me figure out where my floor of earnings need to be so that I can go then pay attention to an engine to kind of feed the legacy wealth forever money thing.
Yeah. So are you holding these multifamilies that you're buying? Are you holding them for a short amount of time or a long amount of time? Or are you just kind of doing the deal and then selling it off? Or how does that work for you?
So I want to be a buy and hold forever investor if it continues to make sense. So I live in the state of Illinois, and we were talking about, what's happening with people voting with their feet, and we've kind of had a mass exodus in Illinois. So I don't want to be a seller, but I am a seller in Illinois right now, 1031ing into ownership of stuff in states that I think run a government that makes a little more sense than my own. Because I want to own these things long term.
Yeah. Well, and you've got to make this decision. It's like we were talking about earlier, just being able to pivot, and you do what you need to do depending on what's going on in the market, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it makes sense to hold, sometimes it makes more sense to just dump it.
Well, focused but nimble. Yes. And I actually, I'm working on a personal rule of thumb that I said this in one of the accountability calls we have on aspiring women, and a couple women's ears perked up. So I guess I'll say it to you and get your 2 cents. In these, the single family kind of turnkey rental reposition things that I was talking about, the way that I'm looking at that is if the cash flow, basically I'm making the cash flow and the loan pay down, if that amount times 5 years worth of collecting that amount is less than how much I can make by selling it today, I think it makes sense to sell it today. So if I could capture 5 years worth of upside in
Mhm.
one transaction, I think it makes sense to sell today. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like I agree with that. Especially, I feel like, obviously like now is a great time to sell anything, just the market's so like the inventory is so low, but I think it's smart. That's a good way of figuring out, like, do I need to sell something right now?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you've got some parameters to make that decision, kind of some criteria, like you said, the 5 years, like, will I make more in 5 years collecting what's coming in, or will I make that just by selling it right now?
Mm-hmm.
It makes
Well,
that
I
decision
think
super easy.
And I think that this inaction stuff that I felt myself do for a very long time, it's like emotions were in it, and I didn't have a lot of people who believed in me, and everybody around me thought I was crazy. And a lot of these groups that exist now, they're newer, right? So like to get a chance to talk to, another woman doing big, awesome, cool stuff that's also a mom and doing, cool things with her life, like a chance to know that I'm not crazy and be in this group is huge, right? But that inaction for me was because that emotion was in it. And if I create these types of rules of thumbs of what I need to see, then it removes that emotion.
Mm-hmm.
It makes, oh yeah, no, we hit that. That makes sense. Let's go,
Yeah. Yeah. And this is, I think there's like some things there, right? So
Mhm.
talking about emotions in business, like as women, I feel like we're just naturally more emotional creatures. And so it's a little bit more to overcome sometimes, like taking the emotion out of it. Like I was able to do that a long time ago, just because you realize quickly, like what's going to drain your energy, just
Mhm.
as an example, like dealing with tenants. I used to manage all my own rentals and my notes. And I would have to hear, like stories of people, like what their situation is, let me tell you my situation, and they always want to tell you about what's going on. And I'm sympathetic to that to a point, but then there's times where it's just like, I've been burned,
Yeah.
from that. So I learned I need to take emotion out of all this. And it's not because, you're an uncaring, an unfeeling person. It's just, it's business. And sometimes you just have to look at it that way. And it's the same thing too with like flipping houses. Some people get real attached to their projects,
Mhm.
and they overdo it and then they run into trouble and stuff. So you got to be able to take emotion out of a lot of these
But that's a
situations.
skill. If you haven't, that's a muscle. And I think a big take home on this mindset stuff that I'd like to touch on is exactly what you said. You're good at it now because you sucked at it in the beginning.
Oh yeah, it was
Anything
horrible.
worth getting good at is worth sucking at in the beginning. So understand that these things like, knowing how to remove emotion when you need to remove emotion, like the figure out the next right step, anything that we're talking about that's weird and nebulous, it's likely because you haven't stretch that muscle in a while. And the more you work that muscle, the easier it becomes for you.
I agree. And it's a practice,
Mm-hmm.
and still I find myself. So here's something, speaking of mindset and these kinds of like taking emotions out. Um, I wanted to do a video about this and I probably still will, but so we just put a property up last week. And of course, like the situation being what it is, it was multiple offers. Yeah, it was like good stuff. Right. But the first offer that I got, um, came with a letter. So,
Mm.
you get the letter, from the buyer talking about how much they love the house and how they can envision all these things in the house. And this lady went into great detail, about how she could see the Christmas tree in the front window and cooking Thanksgiving meal there and like all this stuff. And it was really touching, but it was also kind of like, I don't really need to know that. That's an emotional decision. Like now I feel like emotions are involved instead of looking at these offers and just what is the best offer that we need to take,
Right.
kind of
Well,
a thing.
and I think that, that is a hack that if you're going to buy a house, that if you're selling your family home that you brought your children home from the hospital to, like that's a different decision
Mm-hmm.
than if you're an investor who flipped a property. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So you can bucket off these things in your life.
Right. And I'm speaking of that purely like from an investor standpoint.
Exactly. Yeah.
But, the thing was like my realtor and I got to talking about it, and it's like, it's almost like I don't even want, like, don't send me those because I can't afford to make an emotional decision
Mm,
about this, and unfortunately that's, again, it's just business, but it can also cloud your thinking, right? And
mhm.
then, she was talking about, that I think actually, I don't know if this is like across the board or if it's just in Texas, but there has been talk of kind of cutting that out because it can also lead to discrimination. If
True.
people are sending photos of themselves in the letters, which you do get that sometimes, like, here's our family, and you can't discriminate like that,
Mhm.
and so it puts the seller in an odd, in a position,
Mhm.
with that kind of thing. So I only say that because we're talking about emotions and business. And that was one of those
Yeah.
ones where it's like, man, like, I'd really like for them to be able to buy this house, but I have 3 other better offers.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like, you just didn't make a good enough offer.
Yeah.
And then
Well,
you walk
you could
away with
always
a
use
guilty
that
feeling.
emotion to come back and say, listen, I've got higher offers, would love to see you get this house. But
Mhm.
business decision, you can up your offer if you want,
Right. Which is what we do. We don't
Mhm.
tell them, like, it's because the letter you sent. Obviously, that's not why, but anyone that does, we always do, like, give us your highest and best when we're multiple offers.
Yeah.
And so, it just, there's so many things to making those decisions, and your mindset and stuff like that goes into just being in real estate in general, I think. So
And
speaking of that, I want to talk about your book because it talks about
yes.
finding your purpose, right?
Yeah. So because this aspiring women achieving more, like our focus is, we're in this situation that this generation of women, there's so many people, there's extra room at the table for women. Last generation, they broke through the glass ceiling and there was one woman in the C-suite and people would, point and say, well, she got the position, I have to hate her. Well, that's not the case anymore. Now it is incumbent on us as female leaders to be lifting each other up and clapping loudly for our successes. So that is what we do at Aspiring Women Achieving More. And because of that, I got an invitation to write a chapter about kind of how I started finding my purpose and living in my truth, as a multi-author book. So there's 20 women from across the globe that write about, big, things that happen in their lives that help them find their purpose for living their truest version of themselves. So we actually launched this week, and it was, it's funny because I, as a fun thing to do with my nanny, did a vision board. And, one of the things that I put on my vision board was Amazon best-selling author. And I put it in a closet, and then I didn't look at it for many, many months. And then I happened to go in the closet and I pulled it out and I looked at this, and there was probably 7 things came true in like 6 or 7 months that I hadn't even put thought to.
Mhm.
It's like, it was a little bananas. But so I'm happy to report that after, 1 week in the Amazon store, we are a #1 best-selling title in 5 different categories in the United States, 2 in Australia, and we are very close in the UK. So by definition, I guess we're international bestsellers.
I love that. I think it's so awesome. I'm so proud of you and just excited for you because I think that's the kind of thing that more women need to hear too, because I think we are we do fall into that maybe sometimes, like, I don't really know what my purpose is. And it changes too, like you think you know what it is for a while, and then maybe something changes, like I went through a divorce last year. Well, that just changed everything for me. I
Yep.
mean, it just kind of flipped my world upside down, and I needed to rethink things and make a lot of changes,
Mm-hmm.
um, because of this.
Recalibrate. The thing is, your blueprint of who you are, you just change the blueprint a little
Mhm.
bit. And I'll say too, for women, we tend to be people pleasers. Like if you're a high performing woman, probably you were a straight A student who did everything right and raised her hand and did everything mom and dad expected of you and all of these things. So you get really good at following someone else's script, that at some point, like part of my story is I woke up at 36, 37, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what I like. I
Mhm.
don't know what drives me, because all I know how to do is jump through other people's hoops. And it's pretty cool because I achieved a bunch of neat stuff, Like, but it was not all of it was because I wanted to, or because it was me. So understand too that there's different kinds of problems. And just because your problem is, oh, I had to go play Division I volleyball, like, shut up, Mandy, your diamond shoes are pinchy. Like, that's still kind of a problem, you know, that's still something that you owe it to yourself to figure out where you want to take your one life that you get, you know? So the book is chock full of many different types of obstacles that women have overcome, and understanding a place to really read something and sink in that you are not alone, and whatever your problem is, somebody else has had that problem. So it shouldn't be as scary as it feels because you are not alone.
I think that's a great message. And I think that's a great way, a good note to end on, right? You're not alone. None of us are alone. And that's, that's a focus for me. And I know that's a focus for you too, is just, encouraging other women and letting them know that they aren't alone, that there's women out there that will support you, that when you need help, there's groups like yours, there's coaches and people out there that really want to help you. So if you feel like you're stuck, you feel like you're alone, like you can't do it, like there's too many things in the way, connect with some of these groups, find a great coach or mentor, and, let them help you kind of get over that hump so that you can move forward.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Right. I just cannot tell you how much I admire you, Melissa.
Oh, same here. I love what you're doing. I think you have such a great group and everybody's so supportive and I just, open and willing to share. And I always appreciate people like that. I think there's a lot of us out there. I think just a lot of people aren't speaking up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Women need to raise their hands more, and we are here to help with that.
Yes, we need to get it out.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us some of your time and your wisdom. And always, I think you're amazing. And
this was so fun. Thank you so much. Right back at you.
Yeah. And I'll put the links up too for the book and for your group so that people can check that out too and get to know you a little bit and what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.